I still remember the sting in her voice when she called me useless grandma. The words slipped out of her mouth like poison and landed straight in my heart. I had raised her since she was a baby. I fed her and clothed her and held her when she cried in the dark nights after her mother passed away. Yet that day she looked at me with eyes that carried no warmth, only cold calculation and shame. I could see it in her face. She was embarrassed of me. The woman she had become had forgotten the wrinkled hands that built her childhood. I was sitting in the corner of her beautiful living room, surrounded by furniture that cost more than my entire life savings. She was having a party. Her friends were laughing and drinking while she introduced them to her new fiancé, a tall, arrogant man who looked at me as if I were a burden placed in his perfect world. When I tried to stand and greet him, she stopped me with that sharp tone that made the room go silent. "Grandma, please just sit. You do not have to embarrass yourself." Everyone laughed. In that moment, I felt smaller than I had ever been. I smiled weakly and sat back down, pretending not to hear the whispers, pretending the laughter did not burn through my chest. But deep inside, something cracked. That night, when the guests were gone, I tried to talk to her. I told her I was proud of the woman she had become, that her success made me happy. I reminded her of the nights I stayed awake sewing clothes just to pay her school fees, of the times I walked miles to get her medicine when she was sick. She did not listen. Her eyes were fixed on her phone, her mind elsewhere. "Grandma," she said without looking up, "you do not understand the world now. You just sit at home and watch old shows and tell stories no one cares about. I love you, but sometimes you are just useless." Those words echoed again and again inside me. I went to bed, but I could not sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how love could turn into pity so easily. The next morning I packed my things quietly. She did not notice when I left. I went back to the small house that used to belong to my husband. The walls were cracked. The paint was fading, but it was mine. It was filled with memories of laughter and struggle and real love. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The old clock ticked behind me. The sound of loneliness grew louder with every tick. Days turned into weeks. No one came to see me. Not her, not anyone. I was not angry. Not yet. Just hurt. Then one evening a letter arrived. It was from the family lawyer. He wanted to meet me about my late husband's estate. I did not understand why. I thought everything had been settled years ago. Still, I went. The law office smelled of old books and polished wood. Mr. Clark, the lawyer, was a kind old man who had known our family for decades. He greeted me warmly and then told me something that made my heart stop for a moment. "Your husband left a sealed envelope to be opened only after his passing, but it seems it was never delivered to you." He handed me a thick envelope with my husband's handwriting on it. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter written in his familiar scrawled style. "My dearest Margaret," it began. "If you are reading this, it means time has taken me away from you. I know how much you have given to this family, and I want to make sure that your kindness is never forgotten. There is a property under your name that I never mentioned, a small house by the lake. Keep it safe and do not tell anyone about it until the time is right. You will know when that time comes." My eyes filled with tears. My husband had always been a thoughtful man, always planning, always protecting. I did not know what he meant by "when the time comes," but I felt a strange calm settle in my heart. That night I took a bus to the lake. The property was just as he described. An old wooden house surrounded by trees, quiet and peaceful. The air smelled of pine and rain. Inside, everything was covered in dust, but it felt alive, as if waiting for me. I cleaned. I cooked. For the first time in years, I felt at home. As days passed, I started to write letters to my granddaughter again, even though I knew she would not reply. I told her stories, memories, things I wish she would remember. I did not send them. I kept them in a box. Maybe one day she would find them. Maybe one day she would remember who I was, but fate had other plans. One morning, as I sat by the lake feeding the ducks, I saw her car pull up. She stepped out wearing expensive clothes, sunglasses, an expression I could not read. I stood up with my heart pounding. She did not come to hug me. She did not smile. She just said, "Grandma, we need to talk about the inheritance." Her voice was cold when she spoke. She looked around the lake house as if inspecting a stranger home. I stood there trying to read her face. She had changed so much since the last time I saw her. Her smile was gone and her words felt heavy. She said the lawyer told her about the property and that she wanted to make sure everything was handled properly. I asked her what she meant by that. She looked at me with those proud eyes and said she thought it would be better if I transferred the house to her name since I was too old to take care of it. For a moment I could not speak. I just looked at her and remembered the little girl who used to hold my hand when she was scared of thunder. The girl who used to say, "Grandma, you are my favorite person in the world." Now she stood before me, talking about ownership and inheritance, as if love was a contract. I told her that her grandfather had given me this house and that it was his last gift. I said it was the one place where I finally felt peace. She sighed and said I was being emotional and that I did not understand how property works. I smiled and said maybe not. She did not like that. She said fine then and stormed out. Her car engine roared and the dust rose behind her as she left. I stood there for a long time watching the road until the sound faded away. That night I sat by the fireplace. The letter from my husband rested on the table beside me. I felt his presence around me as if he was watching quietly from the shadows. I whispered to him that I missed him, that our granddaughter had grown into a woman but had forgotten the meaning of love. I asked him what he meant by saying, "I would know when the time comes." I waited for an answer that never came. The fire flickered and the wind blew softly through the window. Somewhere deep inside me something began to change. Days passed and she did not return. Then one morning I received a call from the same lawyer. He said my granddaughter had requested to review the entire will again. She wanted to know if there were any other assets that might belong to her. I felt a deep sadness, but also a quiet strength growing inside me. I told the lawyer that I would come to his office myself. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting confidently beside her fiancé. She greeted me with a polite smile that felt like a lie. The lawyer asked if I was sure I wanted to keep the lake house solely in my name. I said yes. It was my husband's last wish. She crossed her arms and said she hoped I would make the right decision before it was too late. I said maybe one day she would understand that right decisions are not always easy ones. Weeks passed again. I stayed at the lake house and began restoring it slowly. I painted the walls. I fixed the roof. I planted flowers by the porch. Every morning I watched the sunrise over the water and felt something healing inside me. It was not just a house. It was my freedom. Then one afternoon a black car stopped at my gate. Out stepped her fiancé. He was wearing a suit and a fake smile. He said he had come to talk peacefully. I invited him in, but I could see the greed in his eyes. He said he and my granddaughter were planning to open a business and they wanted to use the house as collateral. I told him that would never happen. He laughed and said I was being unreasonable, that I was holding back their future. I looked him straight in the eye and said my husband built this family with love, not with deals and loans. He left angry. I could see the hatred in his face. After that day, I started getting strange letters. Some were warnings. Some were insults. One said you will regret keeping what is not yours. I burned them all. But deep down, I knew they would come back. And they did. One night I heard footsteps outside. I looked through the window and saw shadows moving near the shed. I stepped out quietly holding the lantern. It was her, my granddaughter, standing there with tears in her eyes. I asked her why she had come so late. She said she did not know what else to do, that everything was falling apart, that her fiancé had left her after losing a big deal. She said she needed help. She cried and hugged me. I held her. I felt her shaking. My heart softened again. I told her she could stay with me for as long as she wanted. For a few days, everything felt like the old times. We cooked together. We laughed a little. She listened to my stories again. I thought maybe life was giving us a second chance. But peace never lasts long when greed hides behind smiles. The night it happened, the air felt heavy and strange. The wind outside howled through the trees, and the lake shimmered under the pale moonlight. I was sitting by the fireplace knitting a scarf for her when she came into the room. Her eyes looked tired, yet something about them felt off. She sat beside me and smiled faintly. She asked if I ever got lonely out here. I said no. I told her this house gave me peace. She nodded and said she was glad I felt that way. But her hands were shaking. I asked her if something was wrong. She said no at first, but then her voice cracked. She said she had been thinking about the house and how maybe it would be better for both of us if it was sold. I froze for a moment. I asked her why she would want to do that. She said we could split the money and start fresh somewhere else. She said it would help her start her life again. I looked at her and saw the desperation in her face. I told her I could not sell this place. It was the last memory of her grandfather. It was his dream. I said he built it with his own hands. She looked away and whispered that I did not understand what she was going through. She said everything was gone. The house, the car, the fiancé, the business. I told her we could rebuild slowly, that money comes and goes, but people matter more. She nodded, but her eyes said something different. That night she hugged me before going to bed. Her hug felt strange. It was cold and heavy. The next morning I woke up to the smell of smoke. I rushed to the kitchen and saw the stove burning unattended. I turned it off and called her name, but she did not answer. I ran to her room and found it empty. Her clothes were gone. Her suitcase was missing. I felt a chill run through me. Then I saw the small box where I kept my husband's letter. It was open. The letter was gone. My knees felt weak. I sat on the bed and tried to breathe. She had taken it. The only thing that truly connected me to him. I felt my heart shatter again. Days passed with no sign of her. I went to the lawyer office, hoping maybe she had gone there. He said he had not seen her, but that she had called asking about the ownership papers. My body went numb. I realized she was trying to take the lake house from me. I went home that evening and sat by the window. The sky was dark. I could hear the rain hitting the roof. I thought about all the years I had spent raising her, the sacrifices, the nights without sleep, the love that never asked for anything in return. And this was what I received. Betrayal. The next day, a man from the bank came to the house. He said he was there for inspection. I told him I had not requested any inspection. He said the property had been listed for evaluation by my granddaughter. I felt the ground shake under my feet. I told him she had no right to do that. He apologized and said he was just following orders. I told him to leave and never come back. When he left, I locked every door and window. I sat in the dark for a long time thinking about what to do. I knew then that my husband's words were not just loving advice. They were a warning. He told me to keep the house safe until the time was right. Now I understood. The time had come. She was trying to take everything from me, but I would not let her. I went to the small chest under my bed where I kept all old documents. Inside I found another envelope. It was sealed and addressed to the lawyer. My husband had written on it, "To be opened only if the property is ever disputed." My hands shook as I held it. I knew this was the answer. The next morning I went straight to the lawyer office. I gave him the envelope and waited. He opened it carefully and began to read. His eyes widened. He looked at me and said, "Margaret, your husband was wise. He left clear instructions. If anyone tries to claim this property against your will, it will be transferred directly into a charitable trust under your name." I felt tears fall from my eyes. My husband had protected me even after death. I asked the lawyer to file the document immediately. He nodded and said he would handle it personally. Later that evening, as I returned home, I saw a car parked outside. It was her again. She stood there in the rain looking lost. I stepped out and faced her. She said she was sorry. She said she did not mean to hurt me. She said she had no one left and that everything she did was out of fear. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to forgive her. But something inside me had changed. I told her the truth, that she could not take what was never hers. That love built this house, not greed. She cried and said she did not know what to do now. I said maybe she should learn what it means to start over. Just like I once did. She drove away without saying another word. The rain washed her footprints off the ground. I watched her go until the taillights disappeared into the darkness. My heart ached, but I also felt free. For the first time in years, I knew peace. But life was not done testing me yet. The next few days were quiet, but I could feel something in the air. The silence around the lake felt heavier than before. The wind whispered against the windows as if warning me that another storm was coming. I tried to keep my mind calm. I cleaned the house and made tea each morning. I sat by the window and watched the sun rise over the still water. But I could not stop thinking about her. I wondered if she was safe. I wondered if she had eaten. I told myself I should not worry. But love does not stop just because trust is broken. One evening, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, a young man stood there holding a small package. He said it was from the lawyer office. I took it and thanked him. When I opened the package, I found the final copy of the legal transfer papers. The property was now under the charity fund in my name. The document said no one could claim it again. My hands trembled as I held the paper. I felt tears fill my eyes. My husband had protected me one last time. I placed the papers inside a wooden drawer and whispered a thank you to him. That night, I sat by the fireplace and thought about everything that had happened. I had lost so much, but I had also learned something powerful. People can take your money and your comfort, but they cannot take your peace unless you let them. I fell asleep on the chair with the sound of the fire crackling softly beside me. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a car outside. I looked through the window and saw her again. She was standing near the porch, holding something in her hands. I stepped outside slowly. Her face was pale and her eyes red. She looked different, broken. She said she came to apologize for real this time. I asked her what changed her heart. She said she had gone through everything she once thought she wanted. Money, love, fame. All gone. She said she finally understood what mattered. I did not know if I should believe her, but there was pain in her eyes that felt real. She reached into her bag and pulled out the old letter from my husband, the one she had taken. She said she had read it many times and that it made her realize how much love he had for me. She said she envied that kind of love because she had never known it. She handed me the letter and said she was sorry. I took it without a word. I felt something shift inside me. I wanted to stay angry, but I could not. I told her that forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It means understanding that hurt people often hurt others. She nodded and began to cry. I held her. This time her hug felt warm and true. We went inside and sat by the fire. She told me everything that had happened. How her fiancé used her. How he took her money and left her when she had nothing left. She said she had been blinded by pride and greed. I listened quietly. When she finished, she asked if I could ever forgive her. I said forgiveness is a choice, not a reward. I told her I forgave her, but that she had to forgive herself too. She smiled weakly and said she would try. Days turned into weeks. She started helping me around the house. She cooked. She cleaned. She even planted flowers by the porch, just like I had done before. I could see a new light in her eyes, a softer one. One evening, as we sat by the lake, she said she wanted to make things right. She asked me to take her to the lawyer so she could sign a document giving up any claim to the property. I looked at her and felt proud. She was finally learning the value of peace. At the lawyer office, she signed the document without hesitation. The lawyer looked at me and smiled. He said I had raised a strong woman. I thanked him, but deep inside I knew it was life, not me, that had taught her strength. On the way home, she said she wanted to start her own small business. Something honest and simple. She said she wanted to help people who were lost like she once was. I told her I would support her. She smiled and said she just wanted me to be proud of her. I told her I already was. That night, as we sat under the stars, she leaned her head on my shoulder. She said she wished her grandfather was still alive to see us like this. I looked at the sky and whispered that he was watching. The wind blew gently across the lake. It felt like a soft answer from him. But the story was not over yet. A week later, I received another letter. It was from the same lawyer. He said the charity fund had received an anonymous donation under my husband's name. It was a large amount, enough to secure the property for generations. I looked at my granddaughter and she looked at me. We both knew who it must have come from. Her ex-fiancé. Perhaps guilt had caught up to him, or maybe life had shown him what he lost. Either way, justice had found its way quietly. That evening, I sat on the porch with my granddaughter. The lake shimmered under the setting sun. The air smelled of rain and pine. I felt peace in my heart. I told her that revenge does not always come with shouting and anger. Sometimes it comes with silence and truth. She nodded and said I taught her that. I smiled and told her no. Life taught us both. The sun rose slow that morning, casting a golden light across the still water of the lake. I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and watched the ripples move gently toward the shore. The air was cool and calm. My granddaughter was still asleep inside the house. For the first time in many years, my heart felt light. The pain, the anger, the disappointment, all had turned into something softer. I had learned that peace does not come from having everything. It comes from letting go of what hurts you. When she woke up, we made breakfast together. She laughed as she burned the toast, and I laughed with her. The sound filled the house, and for a moment it felt like my husband was there too, smiling from somewhere unseen. After we ate, she asked me to tell her stories from when I was young. I told her about how her grandfather and I built our first home brick by brick with our hands. How we shared one coat between us in the winter and still found ways to smile. She listened with her chin resting on her hands and tears in her eyes. She said she wanted to live like that one day. Not for wealth or show, but for love. I told her that was all I ever wanted for her. As days passed, she started a small online shop selling handmade things. She made candles and blankets and little gifts inspired by the lake house. People loved her work. Slowly her business grew, and with it her confidence. I watched her transform from a broken soul into a woman with purpose. She often said, "Grandma, I finally understand what you meant when you said love is wealth that never runs out." Those words warmed me more than anything. Months turned into a year. The lake house became full of laughter again. Visitors came to see the charity foundation named after my husband. They admired how the place had turned into a small community center for local children. My granddaughter helped manage it. She said it made her feel close to her roots. I often sat quietly watching her teach the children crafts and stories. She glowed with joy. I knew my husband would have been proud. One evening, as the sky turned orange, she brought me an old photo album. Inside were pictures of her childhood, her small hands covered in cake icing, her first day of school, her first art project. Each page brought back a flood of memories. She said she wanted to make a new album now, one with pictures of this new life, of healing, of love. I smiled and nodded. We took the first picture right there on the porch. She leaned close and said, "Grandma, you are not useless. You are the reason I found myself again." My eyes filled with tears, but I did not speak. Some feelings are too big for words. That night I walked outside after she went to bed. The moon shone bright over the lake. The trees whispered softly in the wind. I closed my eyes and felt the world settle into stillness. I thought of my husband. I thought of the girl who had once called me useless and the woman she had now become. Life had brought us full circle. Pain had turned into understanding. Loss had turned into grace. In that silence I realized the truth. Revenge had never been about hurting anyone. It had been about showing that love and patience could break even the hardest heart. That kindness could win where anger could not. My husband had known this all along. That was why he left me this home. Not just as a shelter, but as a lesson. As dawn began to rise, I went back inside and found her awake waiting for me. She said she had a dream about her grandfather. He told her to never let greed take over her heart again. I smiled and said, "He gives the best advice even from afar." She laughed and hugged me tight. We stood there in the quiet morning light, two generations bound by the same lesson, that love without pride heals all things. Now, when I sit by the window and watch the lake, I feel a peace deeper than words. The house stands strong. The flowers bloom each season. The laughter of children fills the air. And somewhere beyond the sky, I know my husband is smiling. I whisper to him every night before I sleep, "Thank you for teaching me that even when the world calls you useless, your love can still change everything." Because when the will was read, it was not money that was revealed. It was truth. And truth always finds its way home.